Hey, everybody. Michelle is here. Michelle is here on this, I think it's Thursday. Thursday, June the 11th, 2026. Woo! And I finished my daily workout. Let's see. Let me make sure. Yes, June the 11th, 2026. These glasses are broken, but I like them so much. I have replacements I can be wearing, but I like these. So that's why if you see them kind of fitting weird on my face, that's why they're broken. But anyway, June the 11th, 2026, on a Thursday. Michelle is here. Michelle is here. Waiting before I can, because I have some things to do later. Just sitting, relaxing, just enjoying the moments, and contemplating, thinking, not ruminating, but thinking, and feeling thankful that I continue to develop myself and continue to stay aware and in reality and not hallucinating, not participating in delusional, hallucinatory things that are happening in the world. A lot is going on. And thankfully, decades ago, I don't know how long ago, I say decades because it feels like decades, whereas I just do not watch television as I was doing. I say, 5, 10, 15 years ago, where I was binge watching the television on the social media platform all day and all night, just rambling with strangers about this, attempting to, convince people, which that's not my responsibility to be convincing people. But, we get ourselves all into these conversations on the social media platform, and we believe a lot of it is real. A lot of us do not recognize that bots, BOTS, are engaging in a lot of these divisive conversations to get reactions out of us. And it works. It has been working. So that's why it will continue. Where they introduce bots, BOTS, into the conversations, and you think you're actually having a conversation with actual, genuine, bona fide human beings, but you're not. You're having these interactions with technology. And that's fine. Look, people are going to do what they're going to do. I don't know what it's going to take for a lot of us to get offline and get into reality. I know a lot of us are, and so a lot of us are. We are in reality. We handle our personal business. We handle our personal responsibilities and accountabilities. But a lot of us like to help because we know. And when I say we, I'm talking about the innately inclined. We know that the world is in trouble, and we are supposed to be helpers, helping people to recognize that we are in trouble. The planet is in trouble. Our humanity is in trouble. And so we can't necessarily help it, like myself. I wouldn't have put out as many videos as I have if I didn't care and didn't realize and recognize my accountabilities and responsibilities to help. And so you go where people are. That's what helpers do. They go where everybody, if you want to help somebody, you go to where they are, and so a majority of people are on the social media platform, and like I said, engaging in these back and forth conversations with bots, pretending, they're not human beings. But it's a form of artificial intelligence that has been around since the inception of the internet. But the artificial intelligence, the founders knew what they had in the beginning. They knew what they had. They knew that they had a form of technology that they were using not for necessarily improving humanity, because artificial intelligence can bring us to peace tomorrow. If the religious tentacles had not gotten a hold of the technology, we would be in peace tomorrow. Just sit with that for a moment and contemplate what that means. Just sit with that. That, when I'm sitting and kind of contemplating, thinking, not ruminating, and just recognizing what we could have had. Is this, it is a sad reality. But for some reason, I am not deterred by that, because I've been accountable and responsible for my life. Okay, I've done what I felt was the right things to do. Okay, I took responsibility and accountability for my life. Okay, I made mistakes. I've made errors. Okay, I atoned for that. I made things right, whether it's with people, places, or things. I made things right. I've mentioned that, where if I thought I harmed someone, and if it's, I went to these people as best I could to make things right, talk it out, figure out, okay, what's going on, what happened, how do we neutralize this? And so I have a clean slate. I have no skeletons in my closet. There's nothing anyone, even the artificial intelligence, can use against me. Okay? I rest well at night, even though since my new way of living, it's a bit of an adjustment, but for the most part, yes, I rest well at night. I get up and I'm thankful, even though, again, there's some discomforts in this new reality I'm living, because there's just things I have to do to make the discomfort comfortable. And that's a process, just like anything else. When you buy a new vehicle, you have to break it in. When you get into a new house, you have to decorate it. That's the same concept and the same realities I'm living. It just takes a little bit of adjustments. The weather doesn't help. It's hard to do work out in this type of weather. Working, out in nature is not to mention it's extremely dangerous. It's extremely uncomfortable. It's hard to get anything done when you feel as though you're in an oven. And right now that's how it feels, like I'm in an oven. But I'm managing my energy. I'm managing my energy literally, figuratively, and metaphorically. And that's what you have to do. And that's what you have to do for the rest of your life in these type of climates. You have to, it doesn't matter what you have, whether you have solar, electric, battery, living on grid, off grid, whatever you're doing, you still have to manage the energy that you're consuming wherever you live, in your house, outside your house, in a shed, in a tiny house, in a van, in a vehicle, in a shelter. I've met some people that were in shelters, and that ought to be a temporary situation. You don't want to remain in a shelter. So that's why if you are in a shelter, you need to focus on how you're going to get out of this shelter, and not be concerned about what's going on around you with other people in their situation. Do not get yourself mixed up in what other people are going through. This is the time, if you're in a shelter, to be selfish. Okay, and figure out how you're going to get yourself out of that environment. Because that environment was set up to be temporary. But so many people are using it as a permanent solution. Similar to the unhoused and the housed. I told you, a lot of the unhoused, the so-called homeless, that is their full-time profession. Okay? That is how they get paid. By fleecing the system, they can walk into any restaurant, walk into any facility, and get free service. Okay? Snap out of it. That is what's happening. That is how they're taught, by the way, to do those certain things. So for others like myself, who are not unhoused or who are not homeless, to be focusing on them, that's a waste of my energy. And I told you, my energy needs to be consumed properly. Okay? Why would I interfere with a segment of a society, a segment of our society that chooses that particular lifestyle? I mean, think about it. If you're in their shoes, and I told you have some empathy for people, and as well, put yourself in their shoes. If you're getting free service, free showers, free access anywhere and everywhere, why would you want to change that? Some people do not want to be accountable and responsible for paying rent, for paying for utilities, for paying for food. So they take up the inconvenience that we see it as an inconvenience, but they don't see it as an inconvenience to be sleeping on benches, okay, to be in shelters, to be in the woods, or wherever they're underground is where most of them are, by the way. You know, and not being accountable and responsible for their behaviors and actions. They can continue to smoke. They can continue to take their narcotics. They can continue to drink excessive amount of alcohol. They can do whatever they want. Some of the unhoused and the homeless have more freedoms than people that are paying rent and mortgages. Okay, so we need to snap out of our delusion and hallucination and illusion about what the homeless and the unhoused are doing, and focus on ourselves and make sure we are accountable and responsible for what we're doing. Okay, how do we make that right? So, because I'm just saying it's not going to be pleasant for a lot of people, because they have been complacent for decades. They thought, oh no, it's not going to happen. Nothing's going to happen to me. I remember the neighborhood I moved out of, and you know, when I had my home, and you know, the area that I was living in, it was every year. Not necessarily every year, but every few months, I noticed how the flooding was getting worse and worse and worse in that environment where I was. And I knew at some point that it was going to affect my property, because of the neglect, the complacency that was happening within that particular environment, where, you know, where there was some manipulation and deception going on. Let's just say that. And that's when I started getting targeted as well, because I was pointing out certain things that were happening. And that's what will happen to you when you start recognizing, okay, something's going on here that is not, you know, where they're pushing water into certain communities, where they're taking water out of certain communities. Okay, disregarding disregarding services in one part and advancing services in other. You know, it was the type of services were not equal, and definitely not handled fairly. And that's our whole planet, by the way. If you consider what's going on, it's unfairness. Okay, it's unequal services provided to certain communities over another. So I noticed the flooding was changing. I noticed certain environments were, you know, one thing about Mother Nature, let me just say this, and that this should sum it up. You cannot continue to interfere with Mother Nature, the flora and the fauna, and not recognize the cause and effect of that. You can't push flooding water into one community and not believe that it won't affect you sometime. That you will not reap what you've sown. You can't be targeting certain people in your neighborhood and intentionally bothering them because they're either a single, like myself, a single black woman, or black families. You know, people that are that you have a lot of jealousy and envy of. And for some reason, there's a lot of jealousy and envy of the black American. Even though they may not say that, there's a lot of degenerate jealousy and envy of the black American. And I was getting a lot of more harassment and targeting from so-called Latino and Spanish people. when I had my house. I was getting, more targeting and harassment from them. And there was this one particular woman, I knew she was jealous. And I don't know what I don't know what it was. I don't know, it's because her husband was paying attention to me. And sometimes that's when it all starts as well. Or she just felt she had a lack of confidence and a lack of self-esteem for herself. So I became her target. And blah, 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 blah. Again, I noticed that the flooding was changing. Okay? And one day we had this major storm in that area where I was living. I think it was Hurricane Ian, IAN. And that's when I knew there was something that I felt about that particular storm that I knew, okay, these storms are going to be intense from now on. I sensed that those particular types of storms were not going to level off. They were going to continue and continue and continue. And so that's what was happening. Because of the mismanagement and the unfairly treatment of certain communities, there were certain houses that were just newly created, newly built, that flooded out. You look out there, you look out the backyard of some of those properties. It was like a swimming pool. I mean, the flooding was insane, but my property was protected. But I knew sooner or later that wasn't going to be the case. And that's how I feel about the whole East Coast, especially in Florida. Florida, if you are honest with yourself, Florida is below sea level. The whole state. Okay, so eventually the whole state is going to be a swamp. It's not a goddamn thing any administration can do about it, regardless of where they move you. Okay, and what's happening is, I notice in certain cities, and I won't mention, where they intentionally push black people out. And that's happening in a lot of places on the East Coast, where they intentionally, you could say East Coast and the Southeast, from Texas to Florida, and from Florida up into, I don't know, you can go, I'm not sure how far you go up on the East Coast, but the Carolinas, of course, where they intentionally pushed, so-called black people out of those areas, intentionally destroyed those areas, intentionally stole the land, like I told you, my parents' land, my father's family lost their land. Not lost it, it was stolen from them. Okay, and I told you how my dad attempted to intervene when he recognized that the land was being stolen, and they threatened his life. And these were so-called white Christians. Talked about that enough. But my point is, there has to be an equal point at some point. Okay, you can be negative all you want, negative, and treating people negatively. Eventually, it's gonna what? It's gonna neutralize itself, and so that's what's gonna happen. A lot of people are gonna. So in other words, these lands that were stolen from the rightful owners, and that includes the Native Americans as well. The land that was stolen from them is now barren, because the ones that stolen it had no idea how to take care of land. All they saw was greed. The same thing with the state of Florida. Okay, it's all about greed, taking, and the land that they stole is flooding out. by these so-called new owners, these new homes, flooded out. And where can they go? It's not a goddamn place they can go. All right, they had to steal to get to where they are. Where are they going? There's nowhere they can go. So they're going to go invade other states. And the same thing is happening in Georgia. Invade other states. The same thing is happening in Mississippi. Let's go on. Texas. Let's go on. Indiana. All of those places. The same behaviors and actions are going to take place. And then where are you going to go? What other lands are you going to steal? So, it's going to be a rude awakening for a lot of people. It's not going to be pretty. It's going to be downright sad. And it's not a goddamn thing anyone can do about it because the damage has been done. Yes, we are experiencing a lot of negativity via the religious tentacles, with politicians, religious figures, the financial institutions, the military, law enforcement, all of those, that tentacles of people or of groups or whatever they are. Yes, we're experiencing devastation from that. Some disappointments as to how things are being done, the lack of equality, the lack of fairness. But that is nothing, absolutely nothing, compared to what will be experienced via Mother Nature and the climate destruction. And sadly, Mother Nature does not discriminate. Okay? So, those of you that are in righteousness, stay in righteousness. Those of you who are attempting to make things right, make it right. Start with yourself, though. What are you doing? How are you taking care of yourself? Because that will reflect how you are being taken care of by the world, by nature, by whatever. Develop intimacy for yourself. Okay? Love who you are. Love what you see in the mirror. Love who you wake up to. You will always be there. From now on, it's about loving who you are, respecting who you are, doing everything in your power to have empathy for others, but do not interfere. Leave these homeless people alone. Let them be. And watch what will happen when you do. And those of you that are throwing dollars out of vehicles and throwing money to these people, you are probably the worst example of irresponsibility that I've ever seen. Okay? And then you're going to wonder why you're ending up on those same corners, waiting for people to throw dollars at you. Snap out of it. This so-called goodness that you have is fake, and you know it. These so-called bleeding hearts, these so-called, holier than thou, believing you're doing God's work by throwing dollars at people. You get on these boards that supposedly help people, all because you want to feel good. You can care less about the people. You want people to know that you're that you're a member of a board here, that you're CEO of a board there. You want everybody to know these titles you have. Snap out of it. Get a grip and start taking accountability and responsibility for yourself. Protect yourself. Be prepared. Okay? The storms are coming. Okay? As I said for Florida, the intensity of those storms are not going to die off. Okay, they're going to be more and more intense. They thought Hurricane Andrew was intense. They thought Hurricane Katrina was intense. Okay. And it's also going to affect the West Coast. Okay, the West Coast is going to get hit with devastation as well And the West Coast knows that. They've known this for decades. Okay? Mother Nature is going to take over. Mother Nature has taken over. Since the, I think it's 1700s. Or maybe 18. But Mother Nature has taken over because we've caused so much immense damage to this planet with overpopulation of people, places, buildings, equipment, toys, and this extreme hoarding. It has to equalize itself. And Mother Nature is going to equalize it for us. Earthquakes, volcano eruptions, tsunamis, hurricanes, tornadoes, electrical storms, okay? Flooding, ice storms, snowstorms. And not to mention, we're expecting a asteroid or meteorite sometime in the year 2029. Fires, wildfires, bushfires. Be prepared for that. Be prepared for that. All right, I'm going to stop now with my ranting and raving and my rambling and get my day started. But trust me, I will be back.